Right now, somewhere in the world, over 300 million people are bleeding. Not from injury, not from illness, on schedule. Every month, like clockwork, for decades of their lives. It feels ordinary. It is not ordinary at all, because almost no other animal on Earth does this. Not dogs, not cats, not horses, not most primates. Out of roughly 6,000 species of mammals, fewer than 2% menstruate at all. Humans do. A handful of bats do. Elephant shrews do. Some other primates do. Everyone else has found a completely different way to run their reproductive systems, one that costs far less blood and far less energy. So why didn't you get the efficient version? For a long time, scientists assumed menstruation was simply a leftover, a biological afterthought. The uterus builds a lining, no embryo shows up, so the lining sheds. Waste disposal, nothing more. But that explanation never quite held up under pressure, because building that lining every month is expensive. It takes iron, it takes energy, it takes blood, and blood is not free in a body that evolved under constant scarcity. Evolution is ruthless about cost. It does not usually keep expensive processes around for no reason, so researchers went looking for the reason. In the 1990s, evolutionary biologist Margie Profit proposed something strange. She argued that menstruation was not waste removal at all. She suggested it was defense. Profit's idea was that the uterus is exposed to a steady stream of bacteria and pathogens carried in on sperm, and that shedding the lining every month was the body's way of flushing out that risk before it could take hold. Bleeding, in her framing, was not failure. It was protection. Not everyone agreed. And that disagreement is where the story gets interesting. Around the same time, anthropologist Beverly Strassman was living among the Dogon people of Mali, tracking something almost no one had ever measured directly. How often real women, living without modern contraception, actually menstruated across their lifetimes. What she found reshaped the entire conversation. Dogon women, spending most of their adult years either pregnant or breastfeeding, menstruated only about 100 times in their lives. Modern women in industrialized nations, delaying childbirth and using contraception, menstruate closer to 400 times. That is 4 times the ancestral rate. Read that again. Your body was not built for the number of periods it experiences today. It was built for a world of near-constant pregnancy and nursing, a world where menstruation was the exception, not the rule. Which means the ache, the fatigue, the disruption so many people treat as personal bad luck is not a malfunction. It is a mismatch, a gap between the environment your biology expects and the environment you actually live in. Strassman's work also chipped away at Profit's protection theory. If menstruation existed mainly to fight pathogens from sperm, you would expect species with more frequent mating to menstruate more heavily. But that pattern does not hold cleanly across species. So the story needed another layer. That layer came from a different direction entirely, the biology of pregnancy itself. Evolutionary biologists Dina Emra and Günter Wagner, studying the deeper mechanics of the uterus, helped show that menstruation is tied to something called spontaneous decidualization. In plain terms, that means the uterine lining transforms and prepares itself every cycle, whether or not an embryo arrives. Most mammals only build this specialized lining after an embryo signals that it is there. Menstruating species build it in advance, on a schedule, and then shed it if no signal comes. Why build something so costly before you even know if you need it? Because human embryos are unusually aggressive. Human implantation is a kind of biological negotiation, and not always a gentle one. The embryo invades deep into the uterine wall, tapping directly into the mother's blood supply for its own use. In a body without preparation, that invasion can go too far, damaging tissue or draining resources uncontrollably. A pre-built, highly fortified lining acts like a controlled surface, a boundary the embryo has to work with rather than simply overrun. Menstruation, in this view, is not waste and not just infection control. It is the price paid for a uterus tough enough to survive hosting an unusually demanding embryo. That single evolutionary bargain shaped an experience that touches nearly half of the human species for most of their adult lives. And it did not stay in the body. It moved into culture. Across ancient societies, menstrual blood carried enormous symbolic weight, and rarely a neutral one. Some cultures treated it as dangerous, something to be isolated, hidden, feared. Others treated it as sacred, tied to fertility and power. Archaeological and anthropological records describe separate huts for menstruating women in various traditional societies, ritual restrictions, entire belief systems built around this one recurring biological event. Something happening quietly inside the body became a force shaping architecture, ritual, and social rank. Ask yourself why a body process would need its own building. Because for most of human history, no one had Prophet's biochemistry or Strassman's population data. All people had was the visible fact: blood appearing and disappearing on a rhythm tied to the moon, to fertility, to life and its absence. Without a mechanism to explain it, humans reached for meaning instead. Fear filled the gap where understanding was missing. Some of that inherited unease never fully left. Even now, in places with full access to biology textbooks, menstruation is often discussed in whispers, marketed in euphemisms, hidden behind blue liquid in advertisements instead of red. The ancient discomfort did not vanish. It just changed its costume. But strip away the folklore and the shame, and what remains is one of the more remarkable structures in mammalian biology. A system that prepares for pregnancy every single cycle, regardless of whether pregnancy happens. A system built to negotiate with an embryo that behaves almost like an invader. A system running today at nearly 4 times the frequency it evolved for, in bodies moving faster than the biology guiding them. None of this means the discomfort is imaginary or that it must simply be endured in silence. It means the discomfort has a history. It comes from a body doing exactly what it evolved to do, just far more often than it was ever designed to. So the next time this happens to you, or to someone you know, it is worth remembering what is actually taking place. Not a flaw, not bad luck. A 400-million-year-old mammalian lineage's answer to one very specific, very demanding kind of pregnancy, running on a schedule your ancestors almost never experienced this many times. Right now, somewhere in the world, over 300 million people are bleeding. And for the first time in most of human history, there is finally language for why.